Hey, I'm Sam, and it's early here in the Highlands. You can see the mist coming down the hillside. The birds are waking up. It's very still, so I thought I'd try and make this video this morning. I have been trying for a few weeks, but I've been going through something profound, and I'm going to try and talk about it in this video. I don't think I was ready before. I'm going to talk about breakdown, why that happened, why I experienced a breakdown, which wasn't very long ago. It was only about a year and a half ago, and truthfully it's ongoing. These things aren't events, though there are key moments, thresholds, they're processes. And so I'm going to talk about that. So I was born into desperation and fear. And that desperation and fear was pretty much all I knew. And it gave me the pattern for my life. And I've been through hell in my life. And I don't really know how I survived. Just stubbornness, I think. Stubbornness. You know, that feeling that we all, those of us that have had difficult childhoods, the feeling of injustice. And then the spite. I felt spite against the world. I thought, fuck this, I'm not giving in. And but I lived in desperation, and I've talked enough about what I went through in previous videos, you know, drug abuse and self-harm and all sorts of shit. And that's just how it was my whole life. And I could only make sense of myself in desperation, where choice was very limited, life or death. That's how every decision felt, life or death, right or wrong, yes or no. And that way of being just brought more desperation and more conflict. And so eventually I just put myself in a situation where I didn't work. My way did not work, and that's when I started to fall apart, and that was about 10 years ago. I was living on an island, and I'd always been running my whole life, and I ran to that island thinking I'd be safe. I couldn't run any further, and it's there, in the power. When you live on an island, the elements are very powerful. They're a huge part of your life, because your everyday routine is dictated by the wind and the rain, usually. So it's very humbling. You have no control. And that is what tipped me over the edge. And I went to see, I was in such a bad state. I was clawing my way to wakefulness at night and having nightmares, screaming, waking up screaming, and I could not cope. And my body was twisting with the anxiety. And I went to see a healer on the island, and she put her hands on me. We had a couple of sessions and they were very helpful, but then on the third session, I think it was the third one, she had her hands on me and she gave a sharp intake of breath and said, oh, something just moved. Now I didn't feel anything move, but I did have a flashback. And I had a flashback to something that happened to me when I was about 8 or 9. And I'd always remembered it, but I'd never felt it. And I felt it in that moment. And I sat bolt upright and I just cried for the first time. I allowed myself to feel it. I couldn't make sense of it when I was a kid. It was too terrifying, too confusing. It wasn't the worst thing that happened to me, but it was the most disturbing. So that was when I found a desperate, terrified little boy inside me. And I gave him a voice, because he'd been screaming in silence inside me. But then that scream became audible, and I spent many days walking in the howling wind and rain, barefoot in a t-shirt, just to feel something other than the pain. Like the external pain of the wind and the rain on my face and my body felt more real, I think. And it would take me away from that inner pain, but I was screaming at the sky. I didn't even know why I was screaming, it was just primal. I couldn't articulate what it was I was feeling. And so that was 10 years ago. And it's taken all that time to stand here and be able to talk about it. But about a year and a half ago, I had a devastating breakdown. So all of that initial starting point led to years and years and years of gradually giving that little boy a voice and hearing his pain and trying to understand his experiences and who I became as a person, as a compensation for those experiences, as a cope for those experiences. I had to understand all of that. And then about a year and a half ago, I had a catastrophic realization that most people would call a breakdown. And I think breakdown's an appropriate word, because the idea of who I thought I was shattered. I saw myself clearly. I can't even remember what the event was. I think I was just repeating a behaviour that didn't work, and I was just feeling more and more and more pain. And then I realised that I couldn't escape the pain, because the pain was me. And in that realisation, I saw myself clearly. I saw that the pattern given to me as a child, the pattern that defined my life and my identity, was strategies for control, pleas for safety and validation, manipulations to get basic needs met. And there was nothing else. And I could see it all so clearly. The illusion of who I was broke. And then what? There was only the pain that everything was contrived to cope with. Without the cope, there's only the pain. And the purity of that pain was very intense. And so I spent, even then, it's not an event of realization. You make contact with the pain that you didn't want to feel, and then you have to start feeling it, and it has to happen gradually. If it's too quickly, you can't do it quickly. It's a gradual process, and it's a process of grieving. And in that grieving is the acceptance of what happened. And in that acceptance is the validation of everything you invalidated as a child. When you said, this must be my fault, so I shouldn't feel what I'm feeling. And when you invalidate those feelings, when you rationalize the abuse, you invalidate yourself. And I lived with an apology my whole life. So the grieving was intense, and it lasted a long time. It's only just really it's not really come to an end, but it doesn't happen very often, like a realization where the intense grief erupts and I cry. So what broke? What breaks in a breakdown? What breaks is the pattern of our identity, the pattern that holds everything together, the hope, the dreams, the fantasies of a future, the desire to fix yourself, the longing for someone to reach into your life and save you. The pain, the attachment to those relationships, the rage, the injustice, the hatred, most of all the heartbreak, that foundation of it all, the heartbreak at betrayal. That's all held within the pattern of you. So when you break, the person you became, the person you needed to become to survive, that holds it all together, that person does not survive the process of breakdown. And in a way you become nothing. you become nothing. The certainty of who you are, the brittle, grasping certainty shatters. So I've used the word healing in the past. I don't really know what that means. Nothing changes, nothing is fixed, no memories go away. You can't change the past. You have to forgive it all and let it go. You have to, for your own sanity. And it becomes very easy after a breakdown. Because what have I done on this channel? For 4 years, I've looked for the why of me. I've laid myself bare, I've dug around in dark corners. I found a person, but that person is not me. I found the why of who I thought I was, who I became, but that's not me. And so when the pattern breaks, there's no need to draw together more hope, to draw together more stories and narratives, more certainty. There's no need. So, but there is a repatterning, and that repatterning is a repatterning in truth. It's a repatterning as a part of something far greater than yourself, far more meaningful than your own selfish, childish, self-centered needs. It's a becoming, it's not a healing, it's a becoming. It's a becoming a part of something where the boundary of you is not here. You are a part of something far greater. And that's where we discover, I think, who we really are in relationship. And that is the catastrophe of abuse and childhood trauma. We don't live in relationship. That's where we're supposed to be. That's where we find ourselves. But in a situation where the abuser is the caregiver, you have nowhere to go. You can't live in relationship. So you go inside. Inside is safe. Outside is fear. And then to get our needs met, we strategize. We say, okay, if I do this, something good will happen. If I do that, something bad is going to happen. And you manipulate, and you take, and you draw things to you. Love, safety, possessions. And you never learn that there is something good in you that you can give. You feel corrupt, you feel wrong, you feel damaged, you feel like your presence is damaging to other people. I felt like that my whole life. But that is not true. None of that is true. It's the pattern given to you by people who are in pain. The pain is not yours. You don't need to carry it, you can put it down. So I'd love to tell you that this is just a simple process. I'd love to tell you that if you just do this and this and this, everything's going to be okay and you can just be here. It's long. It's long and it's painful, and you have to be willing to face that pain. You have to be willing to go into the fire. And if you can do that, and you must do it, if you can do that, the nature of your suffering changes. It becomes not something that you fear to feel, but something you want to feel, so that you can fuel that transformation, that burning away of the false self, and you can actually be here, who you really are. So it's long and it's painful, but if you have the will to survive, you have the will to go through that process. Because that's all you have, is your will. That is all you have. So what is it? This whole process is initiation. Initiations are painful. Initiations usually involve a symbolic death, but this is a real initiation, more real than anything else, where the old self, the self of attachment and pain and experience, is seen for what it is. It's a reduction. It's not really you. So you are initiating yourself into life, into presence. And that's when things really start happening and you really start to participate, because you are here for a reason. There is something that only you can do in the way you can do it. And you can't do that if you're protecting yourself. You have to give yourself. And that's when you discover what that thing is. So it's a long, painful process, but it's worth it. So thank you for being with me for the last few years. Thank you for all the support in the comments. Every single person that's been part of this journey with me has helped me, so thank you. This isn't goodbye, of course. I'm going to keep doing this. But, you know, I just can't talk about things in the same way. It just doesn't feel necessary to talk about, you know, the story of me, to dig around in the painful past. It's a resource. Those experiences are a resource. But, you know, that's what I've been going through anyway. Hopefully all that made sense and is helpful. Look after yourselves. I'll see you soon. Bye.